Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. The stars above shimmered like scattered diamonds, cold and distant, as Jacob's small exploration craft plunged through the thick clouds of an unfamiliar moon. His navigation system had gone haywire after passing through a sudden gravitational rift, and now sparks flew from the control panel as he wrestled with the joystick, his heart pounding against his ribs. The surface was rushing up toward him, forest, rock, and silver mist. There was no time to think, only time to survive. With a thundering crash, the craft skidded across a clearing surrounded by towering alien trees. Smoke rose from the crumpled engine, and the once smooth body of the vessel was dented and scorched. Jacob coughed, waving away the fumes as he unstrapped himself. "Well," he muttered, half laughing in disbelief, "that could have gone worse." The forest was quiet, unnaturally quiet. No animal sounds, no rustling wind, just the hum of something distant, like music underwater. He grabbed his emergency pack and stepped out, his boots sinking slightly into the spongy ground. Everything glowed faintly, even the trees had veins of bioluminescence running up their trunks. "Time to find help," he said, mostly to keep himself company. The air was breathable and gravity was just right, yet he couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched, not with fear, but with curiosity. Something knew he was here. Hours passed. He wandered beneath violet canopies, past shimmering lakes and rock formations that whispered when he passed them. Just as doubt began to creep in, he saw it hidden in the folds of a hill blanketed in mist, a structure, ancient and ornate, a temple that looked as though it had grown out of the land itself. Vines curled around ivory columns, and soft light pulsed from within. Drawn like a moth to a flame, Jacob approached. The doors opened on their own, silent and smooth. Inside, the temperature shifted, warmth washed over him along with the delicate scent of flowers he couldn't name. The walls were covered in murals, scenes of starry skies, winged beings, and glowing couples intertwined in ethereal embraces. And then he saw her. She stood at the center of the room, beneath a beam of light that filtered through a crystal ceiling. Her skin shimmered like moonstone, her long hair cascading down her back like silver silk. Her eyes met his, glowing faintly, and he froze, not from fear, but awe. She wore a flowing gown made of delicate, translucent fabric that shimmered with every movement. There was something ancient about her, yet also heartbreakingly beautiful, vulnerable yet powerful. "You've come," she whispered, her voice like music. It wasn't a question, Jacob blinked uncertainly. "You know me?" "Not by name, but by soul," she smiled gently. He took a cautious step forward. "What is this place? Who are you?" She tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his. "This is the Hall of the Chosen, and I am Amy, the last daughter of the Celestari." Jacob tried to process that, but the warmth in her presence clouded his thoughts. "I didn't mean to intrude. My ship crashed, I wasn't supposed to be here." Amy stepped closer. "No one comes here by accident, Jacob." Hearing his name from her lips sent a shiver down his spine. "How do you know who I am?" "I've dreamed of you for many cycles," she said softly, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Your face, your voice, the stars said you would come when the time was right." Jacob rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "Well, the stars didn't exactly send a map." She laughed, a sound so light and warm it almost made him forget he was stranded. "They sent you to me. That is enough." There was silence between them, not uncomfortable, but dense with meaning. She studied him with eyes that seemed to pierce into the very core of him, and somehow he didn't mind, he felt safe. "You're not afraid of me," she observed. "Should I be?" he asked. She didn't answer, only walked to a pedestal and retrieved a small glowing orb. "Our traditions speak of a union that will restore balance, a bond not forged by blood or duty, but by fate. I was to wait until you arrived." Jacob took a slow breath. "You think I'm that person?" "I know it." He looked around, trying to ground himself in something rational, but the air hummed with energy and her presence pulled at him like gravity. "This is insane," he muttered. Amy stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Perhaps, but tell me, Jacob, when you look at me, do you feel it too?" He looked into her eyes, strange, beautiful, familiar, as if he had been searching for them without knowing. "Yes," he said quietly, "I do." She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Real?" "Then come," she whispered. "Let fate unfold." Jacob didn't understand everything that was happening, but in that moment, logic no longer mattered. His heart had already made the decision. He took her hand, and the temple doors slowly closed behind them. The temple's inner chamber was unlike anything Jacob had ever seen. The walls pulsed gently with light, like the heartbeat of a living being. Ribbons of energy floated in the air, drifting lazily like mist suspended in time. The floor beneath their feet shimmered as if it were made of liquid crystal, yet it was solid and warm. Amy led him wordlessly through the luminous corridors, her hands still in his. Despite the surreal surroundings, Jacob felt grounded by her touch, as if he was exactly where he was meant to be. They stopped before a wide doorway framed in glowing runes. The air inside buzzed with a subtle hum, alive with unseen forces. Amy turned to him, her expression calm but serious. "Before we step inside, you must understand," she said softly, "this is more than ceremony. This is a binding, heart to heart, soul to soul. Once we begin, there's no turning back." Jacob searched her eyes. "You don't even know me. Why are you so sure?" Amy's gaze didn't waver. "Because I've felt you in my dreams since I was a child. Every time I closed my eyes, you were there, reaching for me across the stars. I don't know the reason, but I know it's real." The sincerity in her voice touched something deep inside him. He wasn't one to believe in fate or ancient prophecies, but standing there, holding her hand, he couldn't deny what he felt, a pull, not just to her, but to this moment. "Then let's see it through," Jacob said steadily. Together, Amy's lips curved into a gentle smile. Together, they stepped inside. The room was vast and dome-shaped, with a glass ceiling revealing the night sky. Stars twinkled overhead, yet they seemed closer here, brighter, more alive. In the center of the chamber stood a circular platform, surrounded by floating petals of light. As they approached, the petals began to swirl in elegant patterns, responding to their presence. Amy led Jacob to the center. Two ethereal robes appeared on a stand, hers glowed silver, his a soft golden hue. She took hers and slipped it over her gown, the fabric merging with her skin as if woven from the moonlight itself. Jacob hesitated, then took his. It was lighter than air and fit perfectly, wrapping around him with a comforting warmth. The platform beneath them began to glow. From the perimeter, slender columns rose, each releasing a gentle beam of light. A low hum echoed through the chamber, not mechanical, but harmonious, as if the temple itself were singing. Amy raised her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "By the stars that guide us and the ancient bond that waits to be awakened." Jacob instinctively mirrored her movements. "By the journey that brought us here and the truth that brought us together." As their words intertwined, a golden ring of light surrounded them. The air grew warm, filled with the sense of alien blossoms and something else, something familiar and soothing, like home. "Will you share your life with me, Jacob?" Amy asked. Without knowing what tomorrow held, he replied without hesitation, "I will. Whatever comes, I want to face it with you." Their hands met, and the moment their fingers interlocked, a surge of light enveloped them. The platform lifted slightly, just a few inches, as if buoyed by their connection. The temple walls shifted, displaying images that danced around them, visions of the future, of laughter, of sorrow, of two souls navigating the unknown together. Then silence. The light faded, leaving only the soft glow of the stars above. "It is done," Amy said, looking up at him, her eyes glistening. "We are one now." Jacob couldn't explain the sensation that bloomed inside his chest. It was as if something long asleep had been awakened. He felt her presence within him, not just beside him, a quiet harmony, two melodies becoming one. "Is it always like this?" he asked quietly. "No," Amy replied, her voice barely audible. "It's never like this, not for anyone else." A new warmth flushed his cheeks. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. Everything around him faded, the temple, the stars, the questions. All that remained was her. Amy reached up, gently touching his face. "You don't have to understand everything now. Just stay with me tonight. Let me show you the world you've entered." "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. Together, they stepped off the platform. The robes dissolved as they crossed the threshold into a smaller chamber filled with soft cushions and floating lanterns that emitted a calming glow. The ceiling here showed a swirling galaxy in motion, mesmerizing and infinite. Amy curled beside him on a raised platform, her head resting lightly on his shoulder, her voice calm and dreamlike as she filled the space. "Long ago, my people believed that love was written in the stars, that across the vastness of space, souls called out to their missing halves, and sometimes, against all odds, the stars answered." Jacob tightened his arm around her. "Then I guess the stars answered you." She looked up at him, her expression soft and radiant. "No, Jacob, they answered us." They lay there in silence, gazing up at the swirling cosmos, their hearts steady, their breaths in sync. For the first time in a long while, Jacob wasn't thinking about how to get home or fix a ship. He wasn't thinking about what was real or imagined. He was simply present with her, and that, he realized, was more than enough. When Jacob woke, it was to the soft hum of distant singing and the golden glow of morning light filtering through the translucent ceiling above. He stirred slowly, barely believing where he was or what had happened the night before. Amy was already awake beside him, watching him with a gentle smile that made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. "Good morning," she whispered. "Is it?" he murmured, stretching a little. "I thought maybe I dreamed all of it." Amy leaned in and touched his hand. "No, dream, you're still here. We're still us." Jacob sat up, running a hand through his hair. "So what happens now? I mean, we're married, right?" "In soul, yes," Amy replied. "But our people require a ritual, a formal joining witnessed by the spirits of this world. It is sacred," he chuckled. "So, the alien version of a wedding?" Amy tilted her head playfully. "We don't call it that. We call it jailer, the binding of light. It's rare. It only happens once every generation, and never like this, never with an outsider." Jacob's brows rose. "Are you sure they'll accept me?" "I don't need their acceptance," she said quietly, then added with more conviction, "but they will, once they see what we share." She stood graceful and weightless, and walked to a glowing panel that opened into a corridor filled with dancing particles of light. Jacob followed her, unsure of what to expect, but unable to tear himself away. Whatever this world was, it was magic, and so was she. The temple was different now, it had awakened. As they walked, the walls shimmered with flowing murals reacting to their presence. Scenes of ancient lovers, soaring stars, and celestial unions drifted across the surface like watercolors in motion. With every step, soft petals fell from above, translucent and glowing faintly. Amy led him to a preparation chamber where alien attendants awaited her. Their faces were obscured by silver veils, their hands moving with precise grace as they gently guided her toward a platform bathed in light. She glanced at Jacob. "This is tradition," she said, smiling softly, "but I want you near." Jacob nodded and stepped aside, giving her space. He watched, entranced, as the attendants wove an ethereal gown around her, not fabric, but energy and physical form. It sparkled like stardust and flowed like water, hugging her body before blooming out behind her in a soft trail of light. Symbols traced themselves along her skin, glowing briefly before fading. She looked like a goddess of light and shadow, timeless and regal. Then a hum filled the air. "Your turn," said a melodic voice from behind him. Jacob turned to see an elder, tall, luminous, and ageless, offering him a simple garment. Unlike Amy's, his robe was grounded in earth-tone hues and lined with threads that pulsed like veins of gold. It felt alive in his hands. As he slipped it on, warmth flooded his chest, and his heartbeat slowed. He felt strangely calm, as if the planet itself had placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You belong." When they emerged into the ceremonial chamber, Jacob stopped short, his breath caught in his throat. It was as if they had stepped into the heart of the universe. The chamber was open to the sky, surrounded by spiraling towers that reached toward the heavens. Floating platforms hovered in midair, each occupied by alien witnesses bathed in soft radiance. Stars moved slowly above, and at the center of it all stood a crystalline altar, surrounded by orbs of colored light that drifted like fireflies. Amy walked toward the altar, her steps soundless, her presence commanding. Jacob followed, unable to look away. As they stood face to face, a beam of light descended from above and wrapped around them like a ribbon. The orbs gathered, spinning faster and faster until they formed a radiant ring around the couple. The air thrummed with ancient power. The elder stepped forward, holding a scepter carved from starlight and stone. "Two souls," the elder intoned across the distance, "two hearts, unknown yet known, one from the stars, one from the sky. The time has come. Speak your vow." Amy turned to Jacob. Her voice was soft but steady. "I do not offer perfection, only truth. I give you my stars, my fears, my strength. In your eyes, I saw the end of loneliness. In your touch, I found home. Will you walk with me, even when the light fades?" Jacob swallowed hard. "No words have ever felt more right. I never came looking for you," he said quietly, "but now I don't want a future that had awakened something old and powerful, an energy the universe had long forgotten. And that kind of power never goes unnoticed. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Our love has survived prophecy, danger, and transformation. It has faced the guardians and passed the judgment of the core. It wasn't just real, it was strong, unbreakable." When they emerged from the sanctuary, the world above had changed. The skies were clearer, the trees more vibrant. The temple itself stood taller, brighter, as if the land had been reborn. And waiting at the edge of the clearing was a ship unlike any Jacob had ever seen, not a weapon, not a war vessel, but a vessel of light. Amy smiled as they approached. "The core summoned it for us." They stepped aboard, and the ship responded instantly. Lights danced along the walls and the vessel gently lifted from the surface without sound or strain. As they rose into the sky, the planet below shimmered one last time, offering them a silent blessing. Jacob watched the horizon fade, his hand wrapped around Amy's. "Where do we go now?" he asked. She looked forward, her eyes glowing faintly. "Where we're needed." Their journey took them across systems, some ruined by conflict, others untouched by time. At first, they traveled in secrecy, learning how to control their bond, its growing power, and how to communicate through shared thought and feeling. Together, they healed sick worlds, reignited dormant stars, and brought peace to warring factions who had forgotten what connection meant. Everywhere they went, people could feel it, the bond, not just in the way Jacob and Amy looked at each other, but in the very air around them. Their love wasn't just a private thing, it radiated and inspired. Soon, others began to bond, aliens and humans, hybrids and wanderers, couples who once would have been torn apart by tradition or fear now stood proud. The galaxy began to shift, slowly but undeniably. Amy became known as the Star Bride, Jacob as the Lightbound. But titles didn't matter to them, only each other. Their greatest moment came on the newly terraformed moon of Salera, where leaders from dozens of civilizations gathered beneath twin suns to witness something that hadn't happened in eons, a universal pact signed not with weapons but with unity. Jacob and Amy stood at the center, hand in hand, as the agreement was sealed, peace for the first time in thousands of years. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Amy turned to him with tears in her eyes. "We did it." Jacob kissed her softly. "No, you did it. I just followed your light." She smiled, her eyes shimmering. "And now, we lead it together." Years passed, the galaxy continued to grow, and so did their family. On a peaceful world wrapped in oceans and floating mountains, Jacob held a small child in his arms, a baby boy with silver-threaded hair and eyes that gleamed with light even as he slept. Amy stood beside him, watching their son with quiet wonder. "He carries the Corps' gift, just like us." Jacob kissed the child's forehead, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "He'll never know what it's like to feel lost, not like we did." "No," Amy agreed. "Because he'll be born into a world that knows love like ours is possible." Together, they walked to the edge of a cliff where the skies painted endless colors and the wind whispered ancient lullabies. Below them, cities shimmered with peace, above them, stars danced without fear. Jacob looked out, holding his family close. He had crash-landed on a forgotten world, once alone, directionless, and now he was here, reborn, bound to a woman who was once a mystery and now his entire universe. Love had found him in the most unlikely place, and it had changed everything forever. The end. Star. Jacob sensed it, they wouldn't return, not to harm, not to interfere. When they were alone again, Amy turned to him, her eyes soft but shining. "You've become something more," she whispered. Jacob looked down at his chest, his fingers brushing the mark there. "I don't feel more, I just feel like me, but not alone anymore." Amy smiled. "That's exactly what more is." He reached for her hand, pulling her close. "You were right about this place, the core. It's alive." She nodded. "It's the heart of the planet, and now part of us. It accepted our bond. That's why the Guardians couldn't touch us, not because we're powerful, but because we're true." They stood like that for a long time, in the center of the chamber surrounded by golden light and quiet music that echoed faintly from the crystal walls. The world had shifted around them, but in that moment, everything felt still. "Come," Amy said gently. "There's a place the core only opens for the bonded." She led him through a narrow opening that appeared in the stone. It closed silently behind them, revealing a hidden sanctuary carved into the mountain's heart. The chamber was smaller, more intimate, lit by a floating orb that bathed the space in soft blues and purples. Water trickled from cracks in the walls, pooling into a warm, shallow basin lined with glowing stones. Jacob stared, oddly amused again. "You really know how to pick honeymoon spots." Amy laughed softly and pulled him toward the basin. They stepped into the warmth wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. The water sparkled as their bodies sank into it, their hands still intertwined. For the first time since the bond was awakened, they had a moment to simply be. "Tell me something real," Amy said suddenly, leaning her head on his shoulder. Jacob tilted his head. "Something real, something about you, something I didn't see in the memories." He thought for a moment, then said, "When I was a kid, I used to sneak out at night and lie on the roof of our house. I'd look at the stars and imagine being somewhere else, not because I hated Earth or my life, but because I always felt like part of me was missing, like I belonged somewhere far away, with someone I hadn't met yet." Amy's fingers tightened around his. "I think I was waiting for you," he added quietly. "I think I was waiting for you, too." They kissed again, not with urgency this time but with deep, quiet reverence, the kind of kiss that seals more than passion, it seals understanding, commitment, and truth. Later, as they rested together in the warmth of the water, Jacob watched the slow swirl of light above them. "So what now? We stay here forever?" Amy smiled, though her smile was tinged with sadness. "No, we've been granted peace but not escape. The bond changed us, but it also awakened something else, a ripple that will spread far beyond this world. The others will feel it, other rulers, other systems. There will be those who fear it and those who want it for themselves. Jacob nodded slowly. You're saying this isn't the end? It's the beginning, he whispered. She exhaled. Guess I picked a hell of a time to crash land, he chuckled softly. Or perhaps the perfect time. A silence passed, then Amy reached into the water and retrieved a small crystal that had floated to the surface. It glowed gently in her palm. This, she said, is the seed of a new era. We'll take it with us. It will help us build something better, a future where bonds like ours aren't feared. Jacob took it from her, feeling its warmth. Then we'll plant it together. As the stars shifted overhead and the waters calmed around them, they sat in silence, holding on to each other and to hope. For the first time in either of their lives, they weren't waiting anymore, they were beginning. Days passed within the sanctuary, though time seemed to move differently beneath the planet's surface. There was no sun to track, no wind to measure, only the pulse of the world's heart, in the quiet, sacred rhythm of two souls healing. Jacob and Amy spent those days learning not just about each other, but about the bond that now tethered them to something larger than themselves. The core, still glowing gently, responded to their thoughts, their feelings. It revealed ancient knowledge, maps of forgotten star systems, echoes of civilizations that once thrived, stories carved into the light itself. The crystal, the seed of a new era, as Amy called it, rested in a place of honor within the chamber. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and patient, waiting. We can't stay here forever, can we? Jacob asked one night, as they lay side by side beneath a canopy of shifting starlight. Amy turned toward him, brushing her fingers along his jaw. No. The galaxy will come looking, not just for us, but for what we represent. He nodded, already knowing the truth. They were no longer just individuals, their union was something greater. They reached the halfway point when a thunderous cry echoed behind them, a deep, unnatural sound that froze the blood in Jacob's veins. He turned. A guardian had landed at the canyon's edge. It was taller than any creature he had seen, cloaked in living armor that shifted and shimmered with each movement. Its face was hidden beneath a helm of bone and crystal, its arms, long and jointless, ended in glowing blades of pure energy. And though it had no mouth, Jacob felt its voice in his mind, cold, ancient, and absolute. You have defiled the bond. Step away, human. Jacob's grip on Amy's hand tightened. Not happening. The guardian lifted its arm, and a beam of blue light struck the bridge just behind them, shattering the stone. The path behind collapsed into the mist. Go! Amy cried, pulling Jacob forward. The bridge was crumbling beneath them, the glowing mist rising like a storm. They sprinted the last stretch and leaped just as the final section of the bridge gave way. Jacob hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop. Amy landed beside him, her gown torn and glowing faintly from exertion. The guardian stepped to the edge but didn't follow. Instead, it raised its arm and sent a message into the sky, a flare of dark light that disappeared into the clouds. There's summoning more, Amy said, rising to her feet. We have to move now. They raced through a narrow tunnel that descended deeper into the earth. The walls glowed brighter the farther they went, pulsing with warmth and life, as if the planet itself were guiding them towards safety. And then, finally, they reached it, the gateway to the core. A vast chamber opened before them, circular and endless, carved from crystal and stone, pulsing like a living heart. In the center, a pool of golden liquid shimmered, casting reflections that didn't match reality. It was quiet here, peaceful, sacred. This is it, Amy said softly. The core, the place where the bond began. If we complete the ritual here, they won't be able to break it. Jacob stepped toward the pool, staring into its depth. What do we have to do? She turned to him, eyes glowing with the same gold as the liquid. We must fully merge, not just physically, but spiritually, our minds, our memories, our truths. You'll see everything I've been, and I'll see everything you are. He hesitated, not out of fear but out of reverence. You sure I'm strong enough? Amy smiled, stepping closer. I knew it the moment I saw you. She took his hand, guiding him toward the pool. Together, they stepped into the golden light, the liquid warm as it surrounded them. It didn't feel like water, it felt like emotion, memory, time. The moment they submerged, their minds collided. Jacob was no longer in his body, he was in her past. He saw her childhood, lonely, royal, burdened with expectation. He saw the death of her parents in a starfire war, her isolation in the temple, the centuries of waiting, the dreams that haunted her, the ache of longing for someone who hadn't yet been born. He felt her pain, her joy, her hope. And she saw his life on earth, his wonder, his heartbreak, the quiet ache of not belonging anywhere, the feeling that something was missing. She saw how he had felt the first time he saw her, not just attraction, but peace. Home.